I was standing in my grandmother's living room when I heard my cousin Dana say the words that made my stomach drop. She didn't know I was behind the doorframe. She didn't know I had returned after a brief step outside to gather myself. She didn't know I had heard her clearly. "The old bat finally died," she whispered, her voice light as if she were commenting on a weather report. "And the best part. She left everything to me. Everything. The house. The accounts. The bonds. It's all here, signed in her handwriting. I told you she'd never leave it to that charity case cousin of mine." Charity case. I pressed my hand against the wall to keep from swaying. My grandmother, Lorraine, had been gone for less than 12 hours. 12 hours since I held her hand as she drifted from this world. 12 hours since the woman who raised me whispered her final words to me. Words that didn't match anything Dana was claiming. But that wasn't the shock. The shock was the paper I saw in Dana's hands when she finally stepped into view. She was holding a sheet torn from one of Grandma's recipe notebooks, the familiar looping handwriting unmistakable at first glance. I knew that handwriting intimately, its flourishes, its slight rightward slant, its delicate curls that softened every sentence. But what froze me wasn't the handwriting. It was the signature at the bottom. It looked like my grandmother's, yes. But it wasn't hers. Not fully. Something was wrong, subtle but wrong. And the date at the top? 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, my grandmother couldn't even hold a pen. My chest tightened. My ears rang. But I stayed silent, hidden in the shadow of the hallway, watching as Dana tucked the paper into a folder already stuffed with documents. Deeds, statements, certificates. All prepared. All ready. As though my grandmother's death was merely the last box she needed to check. I remembered the last real conversation I'd had with Grandma, 2 months earlier. She'd looked at me with those clouding gray eyes and said something that struck me as odd at the time. "You'll be fine without money, Miriam. You've always been strong." She had never said anything like that before. And now, standing behind that doorframe, I understood why. Someone had been coaching her. Someone had been convincing her. Someone had been rewriting her final wishes. My breath trembled as I stepped backward, unnoticed. I felt the weight of a betrayal I didn't yet understand, but could already feel pressing into the deepest part of my chest. Grandma trusted me to be the strong one. But strength wasn't what I needed now. Truth was. And I was about to uncover it. Slowly, methodically, and with the calm fury of a woman who refuses to let the dead be disrespected. Our elders give us their stories, their wisdom, and sometimes their worldly goods. But when someone tries to rewrite their legacy for greed, that's when the real battle begins. And mine had just started. I didn't know it yet, but that handwritten will, the one Dana so proudly flaunted, was about to unravel everything she thought she'd secured. And I was the one who would pull the first thread. My name is Miriam Ellery, and I am 68 years old. I say my age first because it matters. When you reach this stage of life, people tend to look at you differently. Some assume you're fragile. Others assume you're harmless. And many, far too many, assume you're forgettable. I learned long ago that all 3 assumptions can be powerful tools when wielded deliberately. People let their guard down when they think you're fading. They reveal themselves. They underestimate your memory, your resolve, your ability to seek justice. I've lived through enough storms to know the strength I carry. I survived a difficult marriage that crumbled quietly. I built a modest life as a school librarian, steady, peaceful, filled with the soft companionship of books and children who needed a patient adult in their corner. I retired early, partly to care for my grandmother and partly because my joints began their yearly protest the moment summer ended. Lorraine, my grandmother, was the woman who shaped every tender part of me. She raised me after my parents died in a car crash when I was 7. She was strict, yes, but she was fair. Her voice had the warmth of an old violin. And her hands, always busy cooking, stitching, writing, were the hands that steadied me when the world tilted. But age does what age does. Her memory frayed. Her writing hand stiffened. She needed help dressing, bathing, eating. I was there for all of it, not out of obligation but out of love. My cousin Dana, however, showed up only when there were photographs to be taken or when a holiday gathering offered her a chance to look attentive. She's 42, works in financial consulting, or so she says, and speaks with the performative softness of someone who wants to be perceived as compassionate without actually doing the work. Over the past year, she started visiting more. Not helping, not supporting, just visiting, hovering, observing, testing boundaries. And each time she left, Grandma seemed more confused, more anxious, more rehearsed, as though someone had been feeding her lines. I tried to talk to her about it once, asking if Dana was pressing her about money or the house. Her response still lingers in the air of my memory. "Miriam, dear, you'll be fine without money." There it was again, this strange insistence that I didn't need anything, that I shouldn't expect anything, that someone else should. I brushed it off at the time, thinking perhaps she was simply overwhelmed. But the tone, the gentle but forced tone, that wasn't my grandmother's voice. Not the voice I'd known for 6 decades. Standing now in the shadow of her hallway, listening to Dana gloat over a will supposedly written weeks after Grandma had lost the ability to sign her name, the truth settled over me like dust. I wasn't fighting for an inheritance. I was fighting for her dignity, for her final wishes, for the woman who had fought for me my entire life. But before I could defend her legacy, I had to understand the forces that had twisted it. And that meant returning to the beginning, back to the family dynamic I thought I understood. Families don't fracture suddenly. The cracks appear long before anyone notices them, hairline fractures beneath polite smiles, widening with time, disappointment, and unspoken resentment. Ours was no different. My grandmother Lorraine had 2 children. My mother, who passed when I was young, and Dana's father, Uncle Walter. He died in his early 50s of heart complications, leaving Dana as his only child. My grandmother loved Dana, but that love was sometimes tinted with exasperation. Dana was clever, charming, and dangerously persuasive, the sort of person who could talk a stranger into handing over their wallet and walk away looking like the victim. Growing up, I watched Dana perform outrage like theater. If someone else received praise, she wilted theatrically. If someone challenged her, she hardened instantly. She was a child who refused to lose and an adult who refused to be satisfied. But Grandma, bless her stubborn heart, always believed there was goodness in Dana waiting to ripen. She excused her manipulations as ambition. She forgave her lies as embellishments. She called her dramatic episodes emotional sensitivity. And I, ever the dutiful granddaughter, held my tongue. When Grandma's health started failing, I became her caretaker naturally. I had the temperament. I had the time. And truthfully, I had the desire. Caring for her was not a burden to me. It was the final chapter of our lifelong story. Dana visited sporadically at first. She'd arrive with glossy hair, an expensive tote bag, and a smile that felt as thin as paper. She never stayed long. 20 minutes, maybe 30. But each visit seemed to drain Grandma more than restore her. Afterward, Grandma would sit quietly, wringing her hands like a schoolgirl awaiting a scolding. I'd ask what was wrong and she'd brush it off. "Oh, nothing, dear. Just tired." But something in her face told a different story. A flicker of guilt. A shadow of worry. A rehearsed neutrality. Looking back now, I can see the pattern. Dana was planting seeds, subtle influence, gentle nudges, whispered doubts. Miriam works so hard. Maybe it's too much for her. "Are you sure your affairs are in order?" "I only want what's fair, Grandma." Fair. A word that in the wrong mouth becomes a blade. One afternoon, near the end, I overheard Dana speaking to Grandma in a tone that made my palms sweat with anger. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Slow. Paced. Instructional. Like she was dictating an essay and waiting for Grandma to memorize each sentence. I stepped into the room, but Dana abruptly changed the subject. Grandma's expression was stiff, uncertain. Something had already shifted. Still, I didn't imagine fraud. Not yet. I only sensed a distance between Grandma's true self and the version Dana was sculpting. After Grandma passed, that distance exploded into a canyon. Dana wasted no time. She took charge of funeral arrangements. Poorly. She dismissed me whenever I asked about legal matters. And then, just hours after the cremation, she unveiled her grand performance. A handwritten will, dated suspiciously close to the end, written on paper Grandma could no longer hold. That was the moment I realized the fractures in our family weren't cracks. They were deliberate incisions. And when I began searching for answers, I discovered Dana hadn't merely manipulated a dying woman's fears. She had tampered with documents far more valuable than I'd imagined. The next morning, after a sleepless night, I arrived at Grandma's house before sunrise. I needed clarity. I needed proof. And I needed to see for myself what Dana claimed she had sorted. What I found in the living room made my breath hitch. Stacks of binders. Labeled folders. Legal pads filled with Dana's handwriting, not Grandma's. She'd set up a miniature command center, as if she had predicted, no, anticipated, this moment. Dana was sitting at the dining table, cross-legged, sipping coffee as if she owned everything within sight. The handwritten will lay beside her like a trophy. "Oh," she said casually. "You're here early." "I need to review that document," I told her. She smirked, tapping it with a manicured finger. "This is private." "Not if it involves Grandma's estate." Dana sighed dramatically. "Miriam, please don't make this difficult. You're retired. You don't need the property or the accounts." Grandma understood that. She wanted me to have them because I'm still building my future. Her future. My grandmother's lifetime of savings. My grandmother's home, reduced to stepping stones for Dana's ambitions. "I don't believe she wrote that 3 weeks ago," I said. Dana tilted her head with faux concern. "Grief is confusing, Miriam. But everything is legal. Handwritten wills are valid." Valid. She was confident in that word. Too confident. I walked to the study, ignoring her protests. That room had always been Grandma's sanctuary, a place of letters, journals, small wooden boxes filled with tiny treasures she couldn't part with. What I found instead was disorder. Papers missing. Drawers emptied. Folders rearranged. A lifetime of organization undone. That's when I saw it. An open drawer, one I knew Grandma kept locked. The brass key she wore on a necklace was gone after her death, yet here the drawer sat, open, violated. Inside was a folder labeled, Estate. Thin. Much thinner than it should have been. I sifted through the remaining contents. There had once been a notarized will, drafted years ago when she could still sign clearly. It named me executor. It divided assets fairly. It included letters she wanted shared with the family. All gone. All replaced by a single sheet of notebook paper with her shaky script. Only this time, the writing wasn't shaky at all. I lifted the page from the folder. It was dated 8 months earlier. The signature looked exactly like the one on the final will Dana had flaunted. Exactly. 2 signatures 8 months apart do not match down to the same tilt, pressure, and spacing. This wasn't just manipulation. This was forgery. And that was only the beginning. I kept searching and discovered missing bonds Grandma kept in a metal tin. Bank letters tucked into the wrong folders. And on the desk, half hidden beneath a stack of Dana's notes, a sheet showing a recent transfer of funds to an account I didn't recognize. An account with Dana's initials. My knees nearly gave out. Dana hadn't waited for Grandma to die before taking from her. She had been siphoning for months. But everything she thought she had concealed, every theft, every forgery, had left a trail. And I was about to follow it. I left the house, steady but shaking inside, and drove straight to the one person who had helped me navigate difficult legal ground before. Daniel Keene, an attorney I'd known since my librarian days. He'd helped families interpret wills, settle estates, and mediate disputes that often grew uglier than they needed to be. He was calm, principled, and thorough, qualities I needed more than ever. I laid the forged will on his desk. He adjusted his glasses and examined it quietly. You said this is dated 3 weeks before your grandmother passed? Yes. She couldn't even hold a spoon by then. Daniel nodded slowly. The signature. It's too clean. Too consistent. And the handwriting around it lacks the tremor I'd expect from someone her age and condition. I told him about the missing official will, the disordered files, the suspicious account transfers. His expression darkened the longer I spoke. Miriam, he said gently, this is more than a family dispute. This is potential fraud, elder financial abuse, and unlawful alteration of estate documents. I know, I said. Do you have access to your grandmother's medical records confirming her physical limitations during the date of this supposed will? Yes. That's good. And do you have examples of her real signature from the months before? Dozens. He leaned back. Then we can build a case. We spent hours organizing everything I remembered, everything I'd seen, everything that felt off in the last year. Dates. Conversations. Changes in behavior. Correspondence Dana had pushed Grandma to write. Even the tone of voice I overheard. Slow, rehearsed, pressured. Daniel sent requests to the bank for transaction histories, including any accounts opened or accessed with power of attorney authority. He drafted a preservation notice to prevent Dana from disposing of assets. He contacted the funeral home to retrieve the necklace key taken from Grandma's body. Piece by piece, the puzzle took shape. One discovery nearly buckled me. The suspicious account? It had been opened 6 months ago, with Grandma listed as the primary holder, but the signature on the form was identical to the forged wills. Dana was the secondary holder, with withdrawal privileges. Nearly $42,000 had moved there before Grandma died. But it was the second discovery that turned my grief into purpose. Daniel located a digital copy of the original will that Grandma had drafted years earlier, the one missing from her drawer. It had been scanned by the notary's office. I stared at the document, tears rising. Her real wishes. Her real voice. Her real love. Everything Dana had stolen wasn't just money, it was Grandma's trust, extended too far to someone who saw generosity as weakness. Daniel touched the forged will gently. This won't hold up. And once we challenge it formally, she'll have to explain every discrepancy. I nodded. Calm. Focused. Ready. If you want to proceed, he said, I'll begin the filings on Monday. Proceed. I had never been more certain of anything. But the moment Dana learned I had involved an attorney, she made a move so reckless, and so revealing, that it became the cornerstone of her downfall. Dana showed up at my door the following morning as though she'd been tipped off by fate itself. No greeting. No condolences. Just fury sharpened into a smile. I hear you're talking to lawyers, she said. So you went through my messages? I asked. She blinked, caught off guard for half a second. Long enough for me to see the truth. She had been monitoring me, tracking me, maybe even entering my home when I wasn't present. I'm simply concerned, she said, regaining composure. Legal action will make everything messy. Only for the guilty. Her jaw clenched. Grandma wanted me to have. I found the bank transfers, Dana. Silence. Her eyes flickered, the brief panic of someone calculating escape routes. You don't understand, she said quickly. She wanted to help me. My business was struggling. Then why forge her signature? I asked. Why steal before she died? Why hide the real will? Her breath caught. Barely. But I heard it. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You're old, Miriam. You think you're strong, but you don't have the stamina for this. The courts take years. Lawyers drain accounts. You'll burn out. She underestimated me. She always had. I straightened. Grief doesn't make me weak. It makes me precise. For the first time, her expression faltered completely. I continued, slowly, clearly, letting each word land with intention. I won't raise my voice. I won't break anything. I won't threaten you. I will simply document everything you've done. And once the truth is assembled, it will walk into court on its own legs. Dana scoffed, but her voice trembled. You're making a mistake. Am I? Because an expert will compare the signatures. The bank will provide records. The notary will confirm the original will. And your sudden appearance at my door today? That shows fear. She glared at me with a hatred so raw it almost made me pity her. Almost. Fine, she snapped. If you want a war, you'll get one. She left, slamming the door. I stood there for a moment, leaning on the hall table, breathing deeply. My heart pounded, but not from fear, from clarity. This was no longer about me receiving anything. This was about ensuring that Grandma's final chapter was not rewritten by greed. So I spent the next days gathering copies of every document I owned. Journals noting Grandma's declining health. Videos of her struggling to sign her name months earlier. Voicemails where she forgot the day of the week. All of it proof. All of it truth. On Friday, I returned to Daniel's office with a box full of evidence. He smiled in quiet approval. You're ready, he said. Yes. And I intend to see this through. What neither of us knew was that Dana had already made her most incriminating mistake, and it was sitting in a trash bin waiting for me to find it. It happened by accident. I returned to Grandma's house to retrieve a few personal items. Her sewing basket, some framed photos, her recipe box. Dana wasn't there, but her car was. Probably off having lunch with someone she hoped to impress using money that wasn't hers. As I walked through the kitchen, something poking from the edge of the trash can caught my eye. A torn envelope with my grandmother's return address label. I pulled it out. Inside was a crumpled letter, written in Dana's handwriting but signed with Grandma's name. A practice sheet. Dozens of attempts. My breath left me. I reached deeper into the trash and found more. Scraps of paper with incomplete signatures, misaligned flourishes, corrections. Dana had practiced forging Grandma's signature, and had thrown the evidence away in the house itself. On the back of one sheet was a scribbled note clearly written to herself. Smooth out tremor. Keep slant. Date must be believable. That note alone was worth more than any courtroom speech. I photographed each piece carefully before sealing them in an evidence bag. When I handed the items to Daniel, he whistled softly. This is catastrophic for her. Absolutely catastrophic. Within 2 weeks, the legal filings were complete. A challenge to the handwritten will. A claim of elder financial abuse. A petition to reinstate the notarized will. A request for a forensic handwriting examination. Dana's attorney, some sharp-tongued man unfamiliar with the tact required in sensitive cases, argued aggressively at the preliminary hearing. But when the judge asked whether Dana had evidence of Grandma's capacity 3 weeks before her death, the attorney stuttered. Daniel calmly presented letters from Grandma's doctor. Notes from her physical therapist. A statement from the hospice nurse. Dana's confidence melted with each exhibit. And then came the moment of quiet devastation. The introduction of the forged practice sheets. Dana's face drained of color. The judge leaned forward. Ms. Harper, is this your handwriting on the practice pages? Dana attempted a denial so weak it barely qualified as speech. The judge raised an eyebrow. The courtroom fell silent enough to hear the faint rustle of papers. Her downfall wasn't explosive. It was soft. Inevitable. A quiet collapse of someone whose lies had run out of places to hide. The court suspended the handwritten will immediately. Ordered an audit of the missing funds. Froze the suspicious account. And scheduled a full evidentiary hearing. Dana never looked at me as she left the courtroom. She didn't need to. The truth had done the work. But even with justice underway, I wasn't done grieving, and the aftermath surprised me more than the entire battle. When the legal dust settled weeks later, I finally returned to Grandma's home, not to search, not to gather evidence, but to sit in the quiet space where she had lived her last years. I walked through each room slowly, touching the backs of chairs, the worn edges of picture frames, the windows she loved to keep cracked open even in winter. The house no longer felt invaded. It felt like itself again. A place of memory, not conflict. I sat in her armchair, the one softened by decades of use, and let myself feel everything I had pushed aside. Grief, exhaustion, relief, anger, love, ache. It all washed through me in waves, gentle but relentless. I expected triumph to feel loud. But justice, when achieved ethically, is calm. The funds Dana had taken were ordered returned to the estate. The forged will was voided. The notarized will was reinstated in full. Dana faced formal charges for financial exploitation, and while the court chose leniency due to her lack of prior offenses, the stain on her record was permanent. Her professional reputation suffered quietly but thoroughly. As for me, the inheritance wasn't the victory I cared about. Not truly. Yes, receiving my grandmother's home brought comfort. The modest accounts allowed me to breathe more easily in retirement. But the real victory was restoring her voice. Restoring her truth. Restoring the final wishes she had crafted with clarity long before illness clouded her days. I found her old letters in the restored estate folder, ones Dana had removed and hidden elsewhere. They were written to me for moments she knew she wouldn't see. One line in particular made me close my eyes. Strength isn't loud, Miriam. It's steady. And you've always had the kind that lasts. She must have known I would need those words. I whispered a thank you into the stillness of her living room. It didn't echo. It simply settled, as if the house itself acknowledged it. Losing her hurt, but honoring her healed me. And as the months passed, I realized there was one last thing left to say. A lesson I wanted to share with anyone who has ever been underestimated. If you've stayed with me through this story, then hear this final truth. When people think you're too old, too quiet, or too gentle to fight back, that is often when your strength is at its sharpest. Age does not blunt intelligence. Grief does not erase clarity. And kindness does not make you naive. My grandmother's legacy was almost rewritten by deceit, but the power that saved her wishes wasn't revenge. It was documentation, patience, calm persistence, ethical action carried out with unwavering resolve. Revenge, when rooted in truth, doesn't require shouting. It requires accuracy. It requires believing that dignity is worth protecting. It requires trusting that justice, even when slow, is steady. What Dana wanted was control. What she underestimated was the quiet endurance of a woman she dismissed as old. She thought forged ink and fear would silence me. But the older you get, the less silence you tolerate when the truth is at stake. So here is my lesson to you. Whoever you are, however old you are. Do not let anyone convince you that your voice is too small or your age too advanced to defend what is rightfully yours. Do not accept the narrative someone else writes for you or for the people you love. And when betrayal comes masked as entitlement, face it with documentation, clarity, and calm. The world often mistakes gentleness for weakness. Let them. Because while they underestimate you, you gather facts. While they posture, you prepare. While they forge, you preserve. And when the moment comes to reveal the truth, you do it without trembling. That is how justice lands softly, yet powerfully. My grandmother once told me, "You'll be fine without money." But what she meant, what she couldn't articulate through the fog of someone else's influence, was this: you'll be fine because you know the value of truth. And she was right. I am fine. Not because of what I inherited, but because of what I protected. Her name. Her wishes. Her story. And now, I pass that story to you. May it remind you that even quiet people can restore what others try to steal. May it remind you that ethical confrontation is not weakness, it is wisdom in motion. And may it remind you that no matter your age, You are capable of fighting for what is fair, what is right, and what is true.